You will learn how to be a true leader by reading this book's summary of Simon Sinek's book Leaders Eat Last. You will find out why hotel workers were willing to give their lives for their customers, why allowing your employees unrestricted access to company resources might actually be the responsible thing to do, that, given the right conditions, even you could electrocute someone else, that you are probably an addict without even realizing it, and many other interesting things. Introduction. What are the benefits to me? Gain an understanding of what constitutes genuine leadership. Why is today's version of our society structured the way it is? A society in which some members appear to have a great deal of power to get what they want while other members appear to have no control over their own lives at all? Where exactly do these different hierarchies get their start? These are some of the questions that are investigated in the book Leaders Eat Last, which compares and contrasts the kinds of societies in which people lived thousands of years ago with the kinds of societies in which we live today, including the many technological advancements and complex systems that can throw our lives into disarray. As a result of this, we discover that the distinction between leaders and followers is merely a natural consequence of our biology. However, this does not necessarily mean that all leaders are good. So, what exactly is it that makes a leader deserving of being followed? Reading these summaries will not only provide you with the answer to this question, but also a great deal of additional information. In addition, you can learn a lot from these summaries. Why employees of a hotel gave their lives for the safety of their customers. Why allowing your employees unrestricted access to the resources of the company might actually be the responsible thing to do, and how, under the right circumstances, even you could be responsible for killing someone with an electric shock. How to be an authentic leader, the fact that you're probably an addict without even being aware of it. Concept Fundamental 1. The need for organized social structures and authoritative figures has its origins in our biological makeup. Have you ever pondered the factors that led to the rise of a society's leaders as opposed to its followers? Biology is the answer, and it's not even that complicated. It all comes down to hormones, which have evolved over eons to help us survive by controlling our emotions and moderating our behavior. Hormones affect us just as much today as they did tens of thousands of years ago, and this has everything to do with the fact that hormones are ultimately responsible for everything. When we finish a task, such as finding something we've been looking for or reaching our weight loss goals, the hormone dopamine gives us a feeling of happy excitement as a reward. This feeling can last for several hours. In addition, serotonin and oxytocin have an impact on our social lives because they facilitate the development of healthy relationships with other individuals. And then there are the endorphins, which can make you feel pleasure even when you are exhausted or in physical pain. Endorphins are the chemical messengers responsible for the euphoric state we experience when we leave the gym at the end of a strenuous workout session and the impatience we feel to get back in there for more. Even though they were physically exhausted, hunters in a village 10,000 years ago would have been able to keep hunting so they could bring meat to their families who were starving. Endorphins help them do this. They continue to serve as a source of motivation for professional athletes, such as runners, to reach their full potential. In addition to assisting in our ability to stay alive, hormones play a role in our behavior, and this plays a role in the formation of the fundamental framework for social hierarchy. For instance, in societies comprised of hunter-gatherers, a rush of endorphins enabled hunters to travel for miles and miles in order to secure meat for the community. As a result, these individuals were granted the privileges associated with higher social status. Weaker individuals, who for one reason or another couldn't participate in the hunt, were required to accept less prestigious roles, such as gathering fruits. For example, the formation of social hierarchy began with the establishment of a distinction between those who were considered strong and those who were considered weak. However, despite the fact that hormones are unquestionably accountable for these class distinctions, they also contribute to the cohesiveness of these hierarchical structures by providing the individuals lower on the hierarchy with a serotonin or oxytocin-based warm feeling toward one another as well as the leader. This feeling replaces the destructive stings of jealousy that would otherwise be experienced. Essential concept 2. A feeling of safety is our main engine of progress and must be ensured by the group and its leader. The group as a whole, and its leader in particular, have a responsibility to do everything they can to foster a sense of security for its members. Living in a community provides many advantages for our continued existence, the most significant of which is the fact that we are not required to confront dangers on our own. Because of this, we have a sense of security, which enables us to focus our efforts on advancing rather than on protecting ourselves from potential dangers. When we lived in prehistoric times, we were forced to face peril at every turn. We had to guard ourselves against dangerous animals, other people, and diseases while also attempting to find food and a safe place to live. Living in a community, on the other hand, enables us to delegate the work that must be done to ensure our own survival, freeing up our attention to focus on other important endeavors, such as the development of more effective tools. These factors, in turn, contribute to the advancement of our societies. As a consequence of this, our brains have developed to place a higher priority on the sensation of being safe. As a result, we now do strange things, such as continuing to work jobs that we despise solely for the reason that they make us feel secure. However, safety does not just appear out of thin air, rather, it is the responsibility of a community's leaders to encircle its members in an aura of protection. This circle of safety refers to a group of people who hold similar beliefs and ideals and who support one another in their efforts to defend themselves and one another against danger. The members of this circle are able to place their trust in one another and can therefore combine their resources in order to advance. However, it is ultimately up to the leader to decide how extensive the circle will become. For instance, Bob Chapman changed the direction that management history would take at Hasten Sandiacre by significantly increasing the size of the circle of safety and granting all employees unrestricted access to the goods and services offered by the company. The employees of the company formed a strong bond with one another as a result of working in an environment that promoted safety and trust, and as a result, they began assisting one another during times of personal crisis. Some individuals even contributed their own paid vacation time to help those who were struggling. In light of the fact that being part of a community makes us feel more secure now than it did when we were living in caves, we require the services of a leader who is able to assist us in combining our resources and advancing our cause. Concept essential and degrees 3. These days, the leader of an organization is the one who determines the culture, values, and mindset of the employees. When we think of a CEO, the image that typically comes to mind is of someone who seals deals and drives up profits to unprecedented levels. Nevertheless, successfully running a business has just as much to do with developing a company culture as it does with directing the company's financial affairs. A company is more than the sum of its buildings, investors, and workforce, and this is the reason for this. In addition to this, it embodies a culture that instructs employees on how to approach different problems, how to interact with customers, and how to prioritize values. In addition, leaders such as the CEO are the ones who shape the culture of the company because they decide how the business should be managed. By looking at the past of Goldman Sachs, we can get a better understanding of how something like this operates. Between the years 1970 and 1990, the company operated under the motto long-term greedy, demonstrating a willingness to stand by clients even if it meant financial losses in the short term. This motto was in place to show that the company was long-term greedy. However, since the 1990s, Chief Executive Officer Lloyd C. Blankfein and company President Gary D. Cohn have shifted the focus of the company to short-term profits, even if it means doing so at the expense of the customer. The standards that employees need to meet in order to get hired and, ultimately, to remain with the company are set by the company culture, which has an effect that stretches all the way down the hierarchy and not just on the leadership of the organization. The bravery of the employees of the Taj Mahal Palace Hotel, which insists that the interests of the guests come before those of the company, is an extraordinary example of how company culture can influence staff. The hotel maintains that the guests' interests come before the interests of the company. In 2008, terrorists attacked the hotel, and a number of the employees who had fled actually returned to help the guests. Some of them even formed human shields to protect hotel guests who were evacuating the building. That day, approximately half of the people who went missing were employees of the hotel. Following our discussion on the outward manifestations of leadership, we will move on to an examination of the far-reaching consequences of ineffective leadership. Principle thought number 4. Our sense of responsibility stems from our proximity to and empathy for other people. In their absence, we are able to inflict significant suffering on others. Being in a position of authority does not automatically make one a positive influence on those around them. The results can be disastrous if the connection that exists between the leaders and the rest of the team is broken in any way. When we are removed from the people for whom we are responsible, we are less cautious about the damage that we cause. This is the fundamental reason for why this is the case. Responsibility is actually about caring for other people. Our capacity for empathy, that is, our ability to put ourselves in the position of another person, is the source of our sense of responsibility. If we lack empathy, there is a risk that we will become emotionally detached from decisions that affect other people. And if we add the factor of physical distance to the mix, it leads to abstraction, which causes the results of our actions to appear less real than they otherwise would have. One experiment that provides evidence of abstraction is the Milgram experiment. In this experiment, one group of volunteers, called teachers, were told to push buttons that would inflict electric shocks of increasing intensity on other participants, called learners. These shocks ranged from a mild sting to a potentially lethal jolt. The instructors had no idea that the students were all playing roles and that they weren't actually surprised. Milgram discovered that the greater the distance between a teacher and a learner, the greater the likelihood that the teacher would continue the experiment. This was the case despite the fact that many participants expressed great discomfort at the idea of inflicting apparent harm on the learners. In point of fact, more than half of the participants in one particular group ended up administering what would have been lethal voltage to the students, despite the fact that they could neither see nor hear the writhing and screams of agony coming from the students. When we begin to prioritize our own interests over those of other people as a result of abstraction, this can lead us to actively make decisions that are to the detriment of other people. Take, for instance, the first trip that the Titanic ever made across the ocean. The management considered the lives of the passengers to be nothing more than an abstract concept, which is why they made the decision to reduce the cost of additional lifeboats. This kind of callous decision-making contributed to the deaths of many people who did not need to be killed, despite the fact that adding more lifeboats wouldn't have stopped the Titanic from sinking. Essential Concept 5. Bad leadership has contributed to modern-day selfishness and the dehumanization of others. The modern era has seen an increase in people's tendency to put themselves first, which has contributed to the dehumanization of others. As we have seen in the past, being a part of a group provides us with both a sense of safety and an opportunity for advancement. On the other hand, being alone and feeling threatened makes us more self-centered and leads us to dehumanize those around us. This is made abundantly clear when we consider the baby boomers, also known as the generation that was born after World War II. They became more self-absorbed than their parents because they were raised in affluence and outnumbered their parents' generation. Additionally, they were spoiled by a prosperous economy. In addition, the baby boomers, who had been raised by parents who had made it through the war by banding together, had a natural instinct to oppose the values of the generation that came before them. This made baby boomers more self-centered and critical of authority than their parents had been. This preference for self-centered behavior over solidarity can be seen in how the baby boomers welcomed President Ronald Reagan's handling of the air traffic controllers' strike in 1981. This preference for self-centered behavior over solidarity can be seen in how the baby boomers welcomed President Ronald Reagan. Reagan retaliated against striking workers by firing 11,000 of them, taking the side of businesses that opposed the air traffic controllers' demands for better pay, and placing an emphasis on profits over the well-being of workers. When we put the pursuit of profits ahead of everything else, it can lead to the dehumanization of those around us. This is partly attributable to the advancements in technology that have made it possible to conduct business on a global scale. Because of the massive scale on which businesses operate, it is common practice to think of individual people in terms of business abstractions such as customers, shareholders, or costs. Because of this, we are more likely to dehumanize other people, that is, to view them as instruments that serve a particular function, than we are to treat them as living, breathing people who have their own desires and requirements. Consider the Salmonella outbreak that occurred in 2009, which resulted in the deaths of 9 people and exposed hundreds of others to the disease. What led to the outbreak of this disease? Because the Peanut Corporation of America distributed tainted peanuts to more than 300 different businesses, the disease was able to rapidly spread. The management of PCA knew full well that they were sending out contaminated peanuts, and they did this on purpose so that they could keep their cash flow steady. This is the truly horrifying part. The sixth essential notion is that contemporary society has developed an addiction to higher and more rapid performance. When you hear the word addiction, what comes to mind for you personally? Most likely, intoxicating substances like alcohol or illicit drugs. It might come as a surprise to you, but it's also possible to be addicted to performing. Our biological makeup is deeply intertwined with this addiction. These days, the release of dopamine is tied to our performance on the job and serves as a reward for when we achieve better and faster performance. In the past, its release was directly linked to our ability to stay alive. Many businesses that are working to boost their output are pleased by this development, but they frequently overlook the stability that is afforded by long-term objectives. Take the company America Online as an example. As a means of luring in new clients, the department of their staff that was in charge of customer acquisition devised promotions offering free hours as a giveaway. These workers were given the directive to concentrate on that one particular aspect of performance, i.e., sign up the maximum number of people possible, and eventually they started making offers of 1,000 free hours of work each month. In spite of the fact that they were following instructions to the letter, they wound up being responsible for a significant increase in the company's financial burden because they failed to consider the implications of their actions for the longer term. The fact that we are surrounded by so much cutting-edge technology has also contributed to a shift in our focus away from acquiring value over the long term and toward experiencing a buzz in the here and now. If we take a look at any internet-based campaign for human rights, we can see why this is the case. We experience a rush of happiness and a release of dopamine when we like something on Facebook, whether it's a campaign for human rights or anything else. This feeling comes from having successfully completed a task. In order to prevent ourselves from becoming addicted to these short bursts of dopamine, we need to counterbalance them with a sacrifice that is driven by serotonin and oxytocin, such as actually going somewhere to volunteer or forming relationships with real people. The problem is that as technology advances, it becomes simpler and simpler to simply click the like button, while the actual act of volunteering remains just as challenging as it has always been. Because of this, we develop an addiction to the so-called quick fix. We are now aware of the characteristics that characterize poor leadership. These concluding summaries will not only examine what it takes to be a leader, but also what it takes to be a leader who is worthy of being followed. Essential Concept 7. Integrity and the ability to bond with others are essential for leadership. Integrity and the ability to form connections with others are both necessary components of effective leadership. What characteristics come to mind when you think of a good leader? Probably the first thing that comes to mind is their unique set of skills and areas of expertise, both of which allow them to be successful in what they do. In point of fact, everything boils down to having integrity and the ability to form relationships with other people. Because we must be able to put our faith in our leaders, it is imperative that they maintain their honor. Since we are all aware that those in positions of power are still just human, we don't hold them to an ideal standard. However, what we do anticipate from them is that they will be open and forthright about the errors they have made and that they will accept responsibility for those errors. The foundation of trust and sincerity lays the groundwork for the gradual development of the essential sense of security that the group needs to have. A person in a position of authority therefore has the chance to demonstrate what it means to be honest to those who follow them. For instance, the Ralph Lauren Corporation found out in 2009 that its Argentine branch had been involved in bribery in the previous year. The leaders of the company decided against staging an elaborate cover-up and instead informed the American authorities about the situation. They even offered their assistance to the authorities as they investigated the matter. The company was able to keep its integrity despite the fact that it had to pay fines totaling more than $1 million as a result of taking this course of action. Furthermore, rather than engaging in cover-up behavior, the leaders of the company instead informed the American authorities and even offered to assist them in their investigation. The company was able to keep its integrity and, as a result, the trust of both its employees and its customers by taking this course of action, despite the fact that it meant the company had to pay penalties amounting to more than $1 million. In addition, once leaders have earned the trust of their group, they are responsible for maintaining that trust by forming relationships with members of other groups. It is essential for a leader to keep real connections with those around them in order to remain honest and remain focused on the requirements of others, whether those people are employees, customers, colleagues, or competitors. When we look at the United States Congress, we can see how a lack of bonding can have an effect on leadership. Until the 1990s, the majority of members of Congress lived in Washington. As a result, they communicated with one another on a daily basis, which led to the creation of laws that were based on close collaboration. However, the majority of members of Congress no longer reside in their districts and instead commute to Washington on a daily basis. The end result was approval ratings that were among the lowest ever recorded in the history of Congress. Essential Idea 8. Being a leader means putting others ahead of yourself in order to fulfill a vision. In order to realize a vision, the eighth essential idea is that being a leader requires putting the needs of others before your own. When you go into the voting booth to choose the next leader of your country, what are some of the things you think about before you cast your ballot? What kinds of characteristics do you admire most in a person? What differentiates them from regular people and makes them a leader? To put it simply, a leader is someone who shapes a vision for the future that the entire group is inspired to work toward realizing. Even though every member of the group has their own personal objectives, the collective endeavor as a whole requires a purpose in order to maintain its cohesion, and that purpose is derived from the leader's vision. Consider the case of Bill Gates as an illustration. His goal wasn't to earn billions of dollars or even to build a great company. His dream was to put a computer on every desk. It is precisely this vision that ensures that Microsoft doesn't lose itself in the abundance of profits and possibilities but instead remains a major force on the market. Counterintuitively, by providing a vision for the future, leaders actually serve the led and not the other way around. Indeed, true leaders understand that their duty is to serve the people who follow them. Although leaders do enjoy certain privileges, these come at the cost of an enormous responsibility to the people they lead. In times of crisis, a true leader will use all his personal resources for the good of the community. This principle takes on a quite literal form in the Marine Corps, where the most senior members always receive their meal last. This is neither an agreement nor an order, but a statement: leaders eat last. Only once they are able to put their own needs last can they say that they've earned their status as leaders. The true meaning of the term leader can be found within the word itself. You must lead people in a certain direction, showing them the path and giving them a reason to walk on it. And on that path, the leaders need to follow last in line to ensure that every member of the group makes it to the end. Final summary. The key message in this book is: true leaders prioritize the needs of the group over their own and thus ensure that the group as a whole progresses. Because a leader's vision is a cause for action, it's important to ensure that these leaders are a force for good. Remember, your employees are your family. When you turn to your employees, view them as family members instead of subordinates. Create a vision. If you wonder how to manage your company, try to set a vision for the future instead of concentrating on short-term goals. Thank you for watching. To get the most out of this book, order a copy by clicking the link in the description box. Kindly subscribe, like, comment, and share with your loved ones.